El Huascarán, the highest peak in the Peruvian Andes. This snowy landscape has been venerated since the beginnings of time. It is the dwelling place of the Apus, the spirits of the earth. 4,000 years ago, the so-called formative stage began in the Andes. The inhabitants built large ceremonial complexes that received people who came in search of knowledge. The most important of these complexes was Chavín de Huántar, which was erected on this sacred land approximately when Pharaoh Ramses II ruled Egypt and the Olmec civilization was flourishing in Mexico. Thanks to a complicated liturgy, impressive staging, and the use of hallucinogenic substances, the priests managed to convince the people that they were superior beings. They proclaimed themselves the ambassadors of the gods and exercised power for 800 years without a need for an army. The monument was buried by a great avalanche in 1945. Every year, archaeological excavation work is carried out under the direction of Dr. John Rick, a professor at Stanford University.
We've been working in Chavín for 20 years now, one of a long series of projects that reach back 100 years into the past. But in spite of all this time, all this work by archaeologists, I would estimate that only about 15% of Chavín is known thus far. The years that come will bring much more knowledge about small objects like this one. It's just a little ceramic head that shows someone from Chavín 3,000 years ago. These objects, properly documented in their context, are the things that are going to tell us about how Chavín was in the far and remote past.
Chavín de Huántar lies at the foot of the White Mountains of the Peruvian Andes, between the Mosna and Huachexa rivers. Its influence reached beyond the Andean region.
Este es un lugar enigmático. Aquí, en el corazón de los Andes peruanos, hace 3.300 años sucedió algo extraordinario. Se consolidó la desigualdad social que se inició en el arcaico. Hasta esta plaza, semihundida, llegaban peregrinos desde muy lejos, a veces a 1000 kilómetros de distancia. Este ciclópeo centro ceremonial se convirtió en el teatro del más allá, un escenario colosal al servicio de unos gobernantes teocráticos que se mantuvieron en el poder durante siglos. Pero ¿qué obra dramática era la que representaban aquí? Eso es justamente lo que nos proponemos desvelar. ¿Qué realidad se escondía detrás de sus bambalinas pétreas?
The buildings house some mysterious underground galleries. In the darkness of these stone passages, the priests performed a large part of the liturgical drama. Here they subjected the pilgrims to hair-raising tests of initiation. They experienced the transcendence of their souls and reaffirmed the priest's power over them. But who were the priests that officiated the rituals at this ceremonial complex, and what were they like? The stone stelae found at Chavín portray them as transformed human beings with large fangs, snakes on their heads, and claws on their fingers and toes. Their ritual appearance was imposing. On some gravestones, we can see the priests holding a San Pedro cactus, a plant that was at the center of a major part of their religion. The cactus of the gods still flourishes at today's archaeological digs. The San Pedro cactus was considered sacred. It was a plant created by the gods. The men who consumed its juice found the cosmic path that led to them. The priests performed the ritual to prepare the San Pedro cactus. They were considered superior beings because they were able to contact the world beyond and brought news from the gods. After cutting the cactus, they cooked it for 6 or 7 hours. When they filtered the resulting liquid, they obtained mescaline, the visionary entheogenic alkaloid that they consumed in their religious rites. At first, mescaline produces drowsiness. After that, a great vision, a sharpening of all the senses. Then comes the separation, the feeling of being projected through time and matter. Periodically, certain inhabitants of the Amazonian jungles reached the temple, guided by members of the Chavín religion. They brought animal skins, feathers, exotic animals, and most importantly, yopo beans and varola bark, with which they prepared hallucinogenic snuff. From the moment the pilgrims arrived at the temple, they were guided by acolytes and helpers at all times. Some of the galleries have various levels. Others are narrow and dark. They are totally silent. The enormous stone walls isolate them from the outside world. A narrow passage leads to the most important of them all, the Chamber of the Lanzón, a white granite monolith standing about 4 meters high that depicts an extraordinary being. The Italian naturalist Antonio Raimondi was the first European scientist to explore the archaeological remains of Chavín de Huántar. He arrived about 1860 and was completely fascinated. The monument was half buried and in a very bad state, but he was able to enter some of the underground passages. When the dim light of his torch fell on the feline features of the amazing Lanzón, he realized how important that hall must have been in its time. At the Raimondi Museum in Lima, which holds the extraordinary drawings that this distinguished naturalist made on his travels in Peru, we find his sketch of the Lanzón.
Many believe that the Lanzón represents an anthropomorphized god, but I think it's equally probable, or perhaps more probable, that in fact this represents a person who has been transformed by the incorporation of the elements of fierce animals. This would conform closely to the Chavín idea that there are certain humans who have direct access to power and to the gods.
Constructing the buildings required the work of a huge number of people to transport and carve the enormous blocks of white granite, quartzite, and limestone that weighed up to 10 tons. This titanic undertaking took a long time. The construction took place through a series of additions. They are U-shaped truncated pyramidal structures and sunken rectangular and circular plazas. They began construction with a solid filler consisting of clay and stones, to which they attached the carved stone walls. They raised the walls with large stones, surrounded by other much smaller flat stones to increase their stability. They joined them with a mortar of clay and flat, sharp pebbles that didn't contract when it dried. There were small windows between the galleries, opposite ventilation ducts connected to the outside. The widest gallery is the so-called double corbel. By supporting the roof on 2 large stones, the builders were able to make the passage wider. The theocratic government of Chavín competed with other ceremonial complexes in the formative stage. The priests sent members of the religion to explore in every direction, towards the coast, the mountains, and the jungle. They spread Chavín's technological knowledge as they compiled geographic data about the regions that they crossed and collected information about the people who lived there, their customs, their wealth, and the ways in which they subsisted. It's also possible that the members of the religion charged with spreading the message and fame of the high rulers of Chavín and convincing people to travel to the ceremonial complex underwent a long period of apprenticeship before becoming explorers. The priests periodically appeared before the pilgrims that had arrived at the main square of the temple. They wore the ornaments that distinguished them as extraordinary beings. This carefully studied staging was designed to make the greatest possible impact. Later, under the effects of the hallucinatory substances that they consumed, the pilgrims submitted to the control of the priests, who directed and induced their visions at all times. Each gallery has a unique design. It's likely that each one was the site of a different level of initiation. The final stage would have taken place in the crypt of the Lanzón.
Aquí se ponía en marcha la tramoya del drama litúrgico manipulado por sacerdotes y acólitos. En estas recias galerías se iniciaba a los peregrinos. Al poco de estar aquí sentimos el efecto caverna. El silencio, la quietud de la atmósfera, el aislamiento, la oscuridad agudizan nuestros sentidos. Solamente escuchamos el latido de nuestro corazón, que late con fuerza. Estos muros de piedra nos aíslan de la realidad. Nos colocan a las puertas de un mundo desconocido, de una dimensión diferente que nos atrae, pero al mismo tiempo nos provoca una profunda inquietud.
Under the effects of the hallucinogenic cocktails that they had drunk, the pilgrims experienced their first psychedelic flights, induced by the sound effects, smells, and lighting that they were subjected to in order to stimulate their visions. The priests observed them constantly and manipulated their altered states of consciousness.
What you have seen here is a reenactment of something that we really believe happened. The initiation, or at least the initial stages of initiation, of new members of the cult of Chavín. The details we can't be sure of because the archaeological evidence doesn't permit it. But what we are sure of is that these spaces, these galleries of Chavín, were the place where these transitions occurred, in which people from outside the cult were integrated into the beliefs and privileges of that cult and became members, eventually priests, of considerable power based on the cult.
The Tello obelisk is one of the most important artifacts found at Chavín. It was discovered by the farmer Trinidad Alfaro in 1907, but was named after Julio César Tello, the first archaeologist to study it. It stands 2.5 meters high and 32 centimeters wide. Sculpted on all four sides, it portrays two dragons, one a female and the other a male. They have the heads of crocodiles. The obelisk also bears the images of men, land and sea animals, birds and plants.
Mi hipótesis es de que el obelisco Tello está representando un personaje Libiac, es decir, la divinidad de esta Libia, que es la que genera el trueno, que es la que genera las grandes tempestades, que baja de las alturas y es temido y temible, que está asociado al mar, está asociado a las plantas, está asociado a los animales, y a lo largo del obelisco lo que se hace es representar todo eso.
In 1919, Julio César Tello, a Peruvian doctor and anthropologist, carried out the first scientific excavations at the Chavín site. He unearthed a large part of the monument and recovered 42 cabezas clavas. Only 3 of them were still fixed to the walls. Today, only 1 still occupies its original spot. They're called cabezas clavas or nail heads because they have a spike in the rear that was used to fix them in the walls like a nail. They are zoomorphic, transformed human beings. They intensify the majestic effect of the architecture that the priests wanted for the ceremonial complex. They were placed in a horizontal row in the upper part of the buildings.
Hemos llegado a un punto en el cual sabemos que Chavín no se expandió como un estado, que es lo que se suponía antes, que había una expansión desde Chavín a la conquista de los pueblos que vivían en las vecindades. E incluso el propio Tello lanzó la hipótesis de que podían haber ido muchísimo más territorios grandes. Ahora sabemos que esto no fue así. Sin embargo, la hipótesis de que era el punto de partida civilizatorio sí tiene sentido. Uno de los argumentos precisamente es el haber definido claramente que a Chavín, como ocurría con Roma o como ocurría con Jerusalén, convergían gentes de todos los países, de todas las naciones que existían en ese tiempo en el mundo civilizado andino. Se iba a buscar predicciones y por lo tanto, llegados allí, llevaban a sus pueblos las noticias de los dioses, las noticias de las costumbres de este lugar sagrado a donde se llegaba a visitar.
It's possible that there were specialists who dedicated themselves to predictions based on the movements of the stars. Here, in the dry season, at an altitude of more than 3,000 meters, the atmosphere is very clear. The view of the skies of the southern hemisphere is breathtaking. The oracle was of great importance in the religion of Chavín. The leaders of other towns and the people of the privileged class came to the ceremonial complex to consult the oracle. This recreation shows us what the divining ceremonies may have been like. After consuming the cactus of the gods, the medium entered into contact with the ultra-sensitive world, where the senses are heightened and clairvoyance and intuition come forth. For these ancient societies, the supernatural and mortal dimensions were closely linked, as were the worlds of the living and the dead. The prophetess performed a specific liturgy of the rite for those who asked for her predictions. During these ceremonies of the oracle at Chavín, they may have also used some of their totemic animals, such as snakes. The sacred nature of snakes is patent throughout the iconography of Chavín. The participation of animals is very common in this kind of ritual all over the world. The seers interpret their movements and gestures, which are considered signs of the language of the world beyond that the diviners know how to translate. Everyone follows closely the prophetess's gestures. Her manual sign language deciphers what the spirits want to communicate through the movements that the reptiles made. The pilgrims stayed stock still as the snakes moved over their bodies. The gods were speaking. Another of the important monoliths at Chavín is the Raimon de Stila, named after the Italian naturalist who discovered it and arranged for it to be taken to Lima. It represents a zoomorphic being with bulging eyes due to the psychedelic trance it's in. It has 4 feline fangs in its mouth. It's holding 2 staffs which finish in snakes. Its extremities are like the claws of a jaguar. It's said that Antonio Raimondi found it one day when he was invited to have dinner at the house of the peasant Timoteo Espinosa. Apparently, they used it as a table. The naturalist immediately realized that that slab of stone wasn't natural. They turned it over, and yes, indeed, It was a gem of the Chavín culture.
Después de 13 años de su descubrimiento, la estela Raimondi llega a Lima. En la capital, esta pieza es incorporada al Museo Nacional y a partir de ella, los peruanos por primera vez conectan con su pasado prehispánico, haciendo de esta pieza la piedra fundacional de la República.
In the previous archaic stage, the societies here had been egalitarian communities with very little social division. But with the construction of ceremonial complexes during the formative stage, the societies were organized with a more pronounced hierarchy. A dominant class of priests and specialists emerged, and social inequality appeared too.
These extensively engraved columns give us a good idea of the strategy of the priests of Chavín in creating inequality. They represent human individuals with animal attributes, the attributes of fierce animals, representing the powers of nature. In this way, the priests were trying to convince people that there are individuals who have direct contact with the gods and those that don't. They should be read, the columns should be read as a catechism that the priests are giving to certain people.
The iconography of Chavín expresses characters and ideas that required an explanation in order to understand the complexity that they represented. They were encrypted images that needed the intervention of a member of the cult in order for the uninitiated to be able to understand. It was a ritual language that separated those who knew the secrets of the gods from those who didn't. Some elements are always present, such as bulging eyes which allude to the ecstatic trances, feline fangs, snakes, and claws. Attracted by the propaganda of the emissaries from Chavín, people began the long journey to the ceremonial complex. From the coastal deserts to the west of the Andes, some leaders of small communities set off on the pilgrimage to consult the great oracle of the sacred mountains. Crossing the Cordillera Blanca, or White Range, was a real challenge, despite being guided by members of the Chavín religion. The journey had an initiatory value. It was a preface that prepared them for the psychic experiences that would take place at Chavín de Huántar. In certain places, such as at the foot of the snowy peaks, they made religious offerings to the land. The acolytes of Chavín taught them to make offerings to the powerful snow gods to obtain their protection. Sometimes they had to cross territories inhabited by hostile peoples. Speed and agility were the best resources they had to get through them without being seen and avoid dangerous encounters. Arriving at the temple after the hardships of the journey was like reaching an oasis. The hierarchs, the members of the temple, and the Chavín religion thrived thanks to the offerings that the pilgrims made. The priests had conceived a strategy to convince the people and reaffirm their grip on power. A power that was sustained by a single dogma, that they were the ambassadors of the gods, the only ones able to communicate with the world beyond. The leaders of the various groups that arrived at the temple were subjected to more complex initiation rites than people of lower rank. Their initiation began with the consumption of the San Pedro cactus.
Oh.
Most likely, they drank it from spondylus shells, which came from the south of modern Ecuador and were considered sacred. After consuming the mescaline, they inhaled the snuff obtained from grinding up the yopa beans or the virola resin. The burning sensation in the nasal passages caused by the hallucinogenic snuff was terrible. Having consumed the first dose, the novice walked down to the secret chambers in the underground galleries. It was like the descent to hell. The circular plaza was a very reserved place with restricted access. That was where the highest priests met to communicate with the gods.
Here in the circular plaza of Chavín, we have one of the masterpieces of Chavín art, technology, and architecture. This was a restricted environment, but a very decorated and colorful one. The floor itself consisted of a black and yellow patterning. The walls were white, the staircases accented with black, stones coming from different places. But most importantly, we had stone that was cut precociously. It was engraved, and there were figures of humans and felines decorating these walls, illustrating the types of ceremonies that took place in this very special environment.
The water channels are a colossal work of hydraulic engineering. There were canals for drainage and others for religious use. Some 6 kilometers have been excavated, which represents perhaps 10% of all the channels that may exist.
Impresionante, sí. Impresionante. Wow.
Ambiente interesante, ¿no?
No, pero estas losas son enormes, ¿no?
Sí, sí. Y es bueno porque hay como 7 metros de edificio encima de nosotros.
Tenemos ahora mismo.
Hay una sobrecarga aquí fuerte.
O sea que esto lo construyeron antes del propio centro ceremonial.
Sí, esa es una de las cosas más importantes, es que no hay manera de instalar un canal después de construir los edificios altos. De hecho, tenía que haber estado aquí antes de esta construcción. Y si estuviera antes, y como lleva el patrón de los canales, responde a la última fase de construcción, o sea que está acomodando la posición de los edificios, los últimos edificios de la época Chavín. Quiere decir que esto fue construido con conocimiento de dónde iban a construir.
De lo que iban a construir después.
Sí, exactamente.
Seguramente sería también una parte de la iniciación, ¿no? El poder pasar hasta aquí.
Sí, yo tengo imaginado que quizás lo que hicieron era de meter gente en la oscuridad y decir que tienen que seguir hasta escapar del espacio. Entonces se puede imaginar sintiendo en la oscuridad la manera adelante. Sin saber si hay huecos profundos.
Impresionante.
Sí.
El teatro del más allá.
Sí, sí, esto no es más allá, ¿qué es?
As part of their initiation, some of the pilgrims walked along the underground water channels. It was one more test that they had to pass while immersed in a deeply altered mental state and without any clear references in time or space. The initial effects of the visionary drugs are unpleasant. Gastric convulsions, dizziness, even vomiting. Then came a loss of balance while the other senses were heightened. Then the visions began, and the jumps from the real world to an unknown dimension and back to reality again, until finally the novice didn't return from one of the jumps.
Hemos continuado por el canal de rocas y llegamos a esta especie de nudos donde observamos un verdadero laberinto de conductos, de canales, desniveles de quiebros, zonas donde posiblemente podría haber esclusas o trampillas. La verdad es que es una obra hidráulica conmovedora que lo utilizaban para manipular el agua, para crear efectos sonoros, incluso estruendos, que podrían ascender por estos sifones hasta la superficie y sin duda quebrarían el ánimo de los peregrinos neófitos que estarían ahí en la zona sacra.
Outside, near the portico of the Falcons, we can see the vents of the deep shafts. They're a sort of speaker from which the roaring voice of the water emerged. With their senses deeply affected, the sound was amplified until it became unbearable. The priests that induced and led the initiations were always on the watch. Water worship is patent at Chavín. They regularly made offerings of pottery in the temple's interior channels. The Chavín pottery ritual was extraordinarily refined and subtle. The pots were spherical, with handles in a variety of designs, such as a pointed stirrup shape. The decorative motifs on the pottery were abstract. Snakes, feline fangs, birds, frogs, and plants expressed a concept and a scene that only those initiated into the temple society understood. Most of these artifacts were found in the Gallery of the Offerings by Dr. Lumbreras, completely shattered.
Here in 2001, in the Gallery of the Caracolas, we found 20 shell trumpets. These are of a species of tropical water snail that comes from no closer than 1,000 kilometers away in Ecuador. The concentration of these highly important ritual objects on the floor of the gallery seems to indicate that this was a sacristy, a location for holding ritual items which could be taken out and used in large-scale ceremonies precisely in this part of Chavín.
Strombus shells were very important. Once they had been manipulated, they became pututus, the horn that was one of the main instruments in their religion. Pututus were closely linked to the design of the galleries, which together with the ventilation shafts acted like a soundboard which completed the instrument. That's to say, the temple itself became a sort of soundstage. In each gallery, the sound was transmitted in a different way. The reverberation, power, and projection of the sound shows that each hall or passage has distinct and studied acoustics. There are specific spots where the dominant note of the pututu is amplified by the architectural design.
I've been found, but the discovery was made difficult by the very complex interaction between the tones of my Strombus pututu and the acoustic conditions of this gallery. Our archaeoacoustic studies have shown that certain places in the gallery allow the easy discovery of the position where the sound was made. But other places, it's impossible to tell either the direction or the distance that the sound is coming from. This suggests that this gallery was designed to confuse participants in rituals and lead to their disorientation because they could not figure out where they were in acoustic space.
The pututu musicians were held in high esteem and linked to birds, nature, and the heavens. The sound that they made with their shells was the voice of the gods. The temple became a soundboard. Strategically located, specially designed shafts transmitted the sound to the exterior.
It's possible that the walls of galleries such as this one, in their time, were originally plastered, giving a different appearance and a very different acoustic performance inside them.
Archaeoacoustic studies carried out inside the galleries have demonstrated that the diverse ways in which the sounds were transmitted were not by chance. They respond to a studied architectural design that alters how sound is spread, its resonance, and its volume.
Oye, y este ducto da exactamente, o daba la luz, incidía directamente en el lanzón.
Sí, es bien claro que este ducto tiene funciones múltiples. Entonces, una luz reflejada desde afuera,
Sí.
tal como podemos hacer con esta linterna.
Sí, la verdad es que, mira,
Da
directamente a
Sí.
la boca del lanzón.
Exactamente, cubre del mentón hasta la frente.
Y además por aquí también saldría el sonido, ¿no?
Sí, esa es la otra posibilidad, porque los estudios de arqueoacústica han indicado que este ducto es un filtro, elimina todas las frecuencias que no son cerca a la frecuencia nativa del pututu. Y la frecuencia nativa del pututu está amplificado por esto.
O sea, quiere decir que solamente el sonido, la nota que emite el pututu es la que se transmite hacia afuera.
Sí, y afuera en este caso es la plaza circular. Entonces un pututu tocado en la galería del lanzón puede ser escuchado en la plaza circular. Esto sería la cosa, si el lanzón hablaba y usaron un pututu para hacerle hablar, gente en este lugar alejado hubieran escuchado que el lanzón estaba dando un mensaje.
Es impresionante porque realmente está a la misma altura, ¿no?
Sí,
De la boca.
sí, la boca está alineada exactamente con el ducto. Con el pututu, su nota principal, que es esto.
Our technical team set up a laser projector in the ventilation shaft, and we were able to confirm that it is aligned to the millimeter with the lanzon's mouth. In Chavín, nothing is random.
Lanzón has a number of feline characteristics, including fangs, claws. Since we believe that the lanzón may have spoken in the voice of the pututu, it's very interesting and perhaps not a coincidence that the pututu can also speak in the voice of a feline. Something like this.
Those who stayed outside heard the feline roars of the underworld while they drank the cactus of the gods. Those strange sounds that came from inside the temple disturbed them and stimulated their psychic experiences. Thanks to the hallucinogenic substances that they consumed, and to the startling liturgical staging directed by the priests, there was no need for faith. They could sense and hear the voice of the gods. Their presence was obvious. Those who were initiated in the underground galleries were given hallucinatory cocktails made with various substances. The effects that those sounds produced in their minds drove them close to a state of panic.
No solo utilizaban la mescalina que obtenían del cactus San Pedro. Se han encontrado morteros e inhaladores que evidencian que también utilizaban otras sustancias, otros fármacos visionarios que venían de la selva. En esta cabeza clava podemos observar dos grandes mucosidades que cuelgan de las fosas nasales. Actualmente todavía grupos selváticos en el Amazonas que utilizan estas sustancias. Cuando las inhalan, el primer síntoma es la salivación y esa profusión de mucosidad. Sin duda, los sacerdotes de Chavín elaboraban cócteles enteógenos absolutamente alucinantes.
The priests were present at all times, above all when they initiated a leader with whom they were interested in reaching strategic agreements. Very likely, they gave them larger doses of the drugs than those consumed by people of a lower status.
Este pozo conduce a la galería de las ofrendas. En 1966, el doctor Luis Lumbreras protagonizó uno de los más importantes descubrimientos que se han realizado aquí en Chavín de Huántar. En estas oscuras galerías encontró más de 800 piezas de cerámica y otras ofrendas. Pero también descubrió huesos de animales junto a huesos humanos. El posterior análisis forense arrojó una sorprendente conclusión. Esos huesos humanos eran el resultado de la ingestión de carne humana. Aquí arriba, se había realizado un gran banquete caníbal.
Nosotros separamos la cerámica de la piedra y de los huesos. Y al hacer el examen de los huesos, lo que yo hice fue entregar todo este conjunto a una arqueozoóloga que muy poco tiempo después de entregados me devolvió un lote de ellos. O sea, se quedó con la mayor parte de ellos, pero había un lote que me dijo, estos no, porque estos son de seres humanos, o sea, estos no los examino yo. De modo que llamé a un antropólogo físico, José Pablo Baraybar, y le pedí que examine la colección de estos huesos, y efectivamente confirmó que eran huesos humanos, y comenzó a examinarlos y me dijo, oye, pero estos huesos han sido cocidos algunos y probablemente hervidos, otros asados, y muchos de ellos han sido partidos, y hay otros que están mordidos, etc. O sea, son restos de comida. Nosotros nos reímos un poco y pensamos que era parte de un sacrificio que se había dado allí. En todos los pueblos del mundo existió el canibalismo, antropofagia en general. En el momento en que aparece la agricultura, ¿por qué causa? No lo sé, aparece el canibalismo.
There is evidence that suggests that human sacrifices were performed at Chavín, although on a much smaller scale than in the later Moche culture. The majority of the ancient peoples shared a universal terror of impurity and a corresponding universal desire for ritual purification. The idea of illnesses and misfortunes as divine punishment was a common belief all over the world. The sacrificial victim atoned for the sins of the community and calmed the god's anger. Perhaps Chavín marks the difference between traditional shamans and the new priests. On their magical trips, shamans traveled to supernatural planes where they could fight against harmful spirits and gods, absorb others' impurities, and return with solutions. The ancient priests, perhaps with more developed powers, offered the blood of the sacrifice to the gods and thus purged the community's guilt. It hasn't been ruled out that after invoking the gods, they smeared the lanzon with the blood of the sacrificed. During the initiation process, moments of calm alternated with times of stress. They may have used incense to create a relaxing atmosphere. Through the proper placement of anthracite mirrors outside, many of which have been found in the excavations of the shafts, they reflected the sunlight inside, creating light effects. The permanent state of altered consciousness that they kept the people they were initiating in allowed the priests to manipulate them at their whim. They administered the sound effects, smells, and light effects to make them temporarily but deeply deranged. During each moment of the initiation process, they controlled the sounds that they wanted to produce, sometimes a calm and harmonious murmur, other times a deafening roar, which mixed with the pututus, startled the people being initiated and drove them from states of calm to stress. Or those who had passed through all the stages of initiation reached the lanzon. They might be members of the families of the priests who held power, or leaders who they had an interest in singling out. Still in a psychedelic stupor, the chosen were led by the temple acolytes to the crypt of the lanzon. They walked in a state of absolute disorientation, lost in a chaos of visions that unhinged their minds. They couldn't have known that they were reaching the end of the test. They were about to be reborn, to be marked for the rest of their lives. Weak and in a catatonic state, they staggered over the last few meters before facing the passage that led them to the lanzon. It's not hard to imagine the profound distress that they must have felt when they suddenly faced the terrifying image of the lanzon. But little by little, they would calm down and their catharsis would be complete. A new transformed being. They were now a member of the cult. They belonged to the dominant class. In the grand plaza of Chavín de Huántar, the pilgrims would wait expectantly for the arrival of those who had seen the lanzon. They would be presented publicly to assert their status. The new priests would be recognized and given ceremonial treatment in public to make manifest that they were now sacred beings. Wherever they went, they would be recognized as dignitaries from Chavín. From the very beginnings of time, when man first looked up to the skies and sensed the existence of the divine or of a higher intelligence, certain people emerged who laid claim to the keys to the world beyond and began to submit their equals to their will. Under its massive walls, Chavín de Huántar still guards secrets that will gradually be unearthed. No funerary context has yet been found to shed light on its enigmatic story. No doubt, the archaeological finds to come will surprise the world once again.